Last weekend, the 2025 Swimming World Cup officially wrapped up during its third and final stop in Toronto. And of course, like with the other two stops, we saw a ton of fast swimming, including 7 new world records. We also saw 2 overall series champions crowned, one for men and one for women, and each champion received a bonus $100,000. So let's go through every event from this third and final stop, as well as how the series rankings looked at the end of things. This video was brought to you by absolutely no one. The first event we saw was the women's 400 freestyle, where we saw our very first triple crown of the 2025 World Cup series, as Lonnie Pallister once again absolutely dominated the field here. With a time of 3:51.87, she resets her own World Cup record of 3:52.42 that she set 1 week earlier in Westmont. That old time was already enough to make her the 3rd fastest performer in the history of this event, and this time still lands her in that number 3 spot. Is obviously just a bit faster. Then in second, way behind her, we saw Erica Fairweather with a 3:56.12, still incredibly quick. Lonnie Pallister was just balling out in first place there. And then in third, we see Freya Colbert with a 3:58.46. Again, a very quick swim. And Caitlin Deans is in fourth, also under the 4-minute barrier, 3:59.89. And like I said, since Lonnie Pallister won this at Carmel, Westmont, and now Toronto, she won the triple crown, meaning that she got a bonus check for $10,000. This was the first of many triple crowns that we're going to see here. But we did not see one of those triple crowns in the men's 400 freestyle. There wasn't one on the table because Carson Foster won this event in Carmel, and then Sam Short won the event in Westmont. So no one got a bonus there. There wasn't a triple crown available, which means that no one was even able to get a crown buster bonus here. But Carson Foster did return to the top of the podium in a pretty speedy time of 3:36.52. At the other two stops, he was a 3:37 high, so that is a very healthy drop for him there. And then Kieran Smith is in second with a 3:37.28. Sam Short also in the 3:37s and the 3:37.89. Then it was actually pretty close through 4th and 5th as well, with Brendan Smith in a 3:38.41 and Luke Hobson in a 3:39.91. This was a pretty close race all around, and it was really fun to watch. 400 distances are kind of one of my favorites, and I really enjoy them in short course as well. Also, with how quickly these guys were moving and going times of 3:36 and 3:37s, it really puts into perspective just how stupid fast the World Cup and world records are of 3:32s. In the women's 50 backstroke, we saw Kaylee McEwen win her first triple crown of the stop, winning the event narrowly over Gretchen Walsh, 25:35 to 25:40. Then Molly O'Callahan was right behind Walsh in a 25:42. So these top 3 swimmers were all separated by just 7/100ths of a second. Then McEwen was also able to very narrowly break her own World Cup record from last year by 1/100th. It was a 25:36, now she's gone a 25:35. That is also a best time for her and resets her own oceanic record. And you may have forgotten that, yes, she did actually swim, I think, 1 day of the first stop at the World Cup last year. She was originally slated to compete at, I believe, the whole thing. She's kind of part of that group of athletes that World Aquatics likes to promote through all the stops, but then she dropped out, either after day 1 or day 2 of that first stop. So she won this event, set the World Cup record, and then we didn't see her for the rest of that World Cup. But she was obviously through all 3 stops this time around, and it's been spectacular in every race. In the men's 200 backstroke, we saw Hubert Koch win his first triple crown of the stop, as well as set his very first ever world record. The world record that he narrowly missed last year during the short course world championships. In 2015, Mitch Larkin set this world record with a time of 1:45.63. Last year, Koch went a 1:45.65, and now he came back swinging, going all the way down to a 1:45.12. So taking about a half-second bite out of that record. In traditional Koch fashion, he back halved this one pretty hard. He was a few tenths behind at the halfway point. He turned in a 51.60, while Mitch Larkin was a 51.35. And then over the second 100, he worked his magic and not only passed the record, but gained a decent lead over it. What's interesting is that Coach closed quite a bit slower than he did last year. By quite a bit, I mean like 9/10 on the final 50, but that's because he closed insanely fast during those short course world championships, but I think that came at the cost of him not having nearly enough opening speed. I mean, his final 50 was his second fastest 50 last year behind the first one, so he redistributed that speed a lot better this time around, got out to a more manageable point at the beginning, and then was able to still have a much faster close than the old world record, but he didn't have to make up a ridiculous amount of ground like he did last time when he came up just short. Thomas Chacon was also incredibly quick in second place with a 1:47.49. I think that was an Italian record from him. Don't quote me 100% on that though. And those two were the only swimmers under 150 as they kind of blow by the field here. There's another Italian in third behind Chacon, Lorenzo Mora, in a 150.32. We actually see a bunch of 150s behind them, so it's definitely a dogfight for that bronze medal position. Regan Smith was absent in the 50 backstroke on day one of all three stops, but that decision paid off big time here as she won her triple crown in the women's 200 butterfly, the event she chose to swim instead. She was a 2:00.34, right off of breaking that 2-minute mark, which I think she really wanted to do. She's 2:00.2 something in Carmel, 2:00.20 in Westmont, where she broke her own World Cup record, and this time she's a 2:00.34. But this was her slowest swim of the three stops, but not for lack of effort, as she went for it right from the beginning, going out right around world record pace. Summer McIntosh holds this world record. The 100-meter split for her world record is a 57.04. Regan Smith was out in a 57.16. The 150 split for McIntosh is a 1:28.17. Smith was 1:28.26, and then the wheels fell off a little bit. She obviously still had a very healthy 2-second margin of victory over Ellen Walsh, who was a 2:02.36. She just fell off of that world record pace. This was definitely way faster than she had taken any of those other races out, and I think she was really going for something special, but it just caught her right at the end. You cannot disrespect that effort though, especially in a 200 butterfly, where you know if you go out fast and it catches you like that, it is going to hurt, and she still finished pretty strong. And Mary Sophie Harvey did finish out our podium finishers here with a 2:03.73. The men's 100 butterfly was maybe one of the most surprising races of this stop, because Josh Liendo rips a world record of 47.68. In Carmel, he was a 50.20 in this event. And now he's the world record holder, taking the world record and the Triple Crown bonus from Noé Ponty, as Ponty was actually back in third in a 48.38. He was going for that Triple Crown. Ilya Haroun also beat Ponty with a 48.35, but Josh Liendo got the win and the world record, so he got the bonus $10,000 for his world record and the first ever Crown Buster bonus in World Cup history of $2,500. This was an incredibly fast and surprising swim out of Josh Liendo, and was a really good hint at the kind of form that he was going to be in for the rest of this stop, because he was moving very quickly through all of his races here in Toronto, in not only his home country, but also kind of his home pool. In the women's 200 breaststroke, I'm starting to feel like a broken record, as Kate Douglas once again did what she does best and absolutely torched the field here, going a 2:13.45, over 4 seconds ahead of second place finisher and her training partner, Alex Walsh, who was a 2:17.88, and she was just ahead of Mona McSherry, who was a 2:18.27. And of course for Douglas, this was her first Triple Crown of this stop. No one was racing for a Triple Crown in the men's 100 breaststroke, but we did see a new World Cup record out of Casper Corbeau, who ripped a 55.56, winning this event by over a second ahead of Adam Peaty, who is second in 56.59, and Shin Ohashi managed to make the podium in a 56.56. 57.06. With that World Cup record of 55.55, Kasper Corbeau just barely breaks the tie held by Cameron Vanderberg and Chin Hai-yang in 55.61, and is just a little ways away from that world record of 55.28 held by Ilya Shimanovic, who actually was the winner in this event at stop number 2. Kasia Wasik was the Triple Crown winner in the women's 50 freestyle, clocking a time of 23.21 for a decent couple of tenth margin of victory over Taylor Ruck in second place with a 23.49, and then Marit Steenbergen was in third in a 23.77. And for his second event of the night, Josh Liendo was back in the water, winning another event in the men's 50 freestyle, clocking a time of 20.31 ahead of Jack Alexi in 20.70, and then Ilya Haroun, also from the 100 butterfly, in a 20.73. Liendo was able to grab the lead right away and just hold on to it, while Alexi was out in second and stayed in second, but Ilya actually had to work his way back into that third place position. He was out in a tie for 6th and then managed to rally all the way back up to 3rd, which is kind of what he did when he won it at the stop before. I am also just amused by the 3-way tie for 6th all the way at the bottom here. That just cracks me up a little bit. And in the women's 100 IM, we see Gretchen Walsh winning her Triple Crown in this event with a time of 55.99, a bit off of her World Cup record from the stop before this in 55.71, as well as her world record of 55.11, but she is still the only swimmer to ever break 56 seconds, and she does it again here by a little bit. Now, we did not have Kate Douglas in this field. She did place second at stop 1 and stop 2. She didn't swim it at this one just because she wanted to focus on being better in her other events, so in her place, Marit Steenbergen is back in the pool after that bronze medal finish in the 50 freestyle. She grabs second here with the 57.32, and then Ruth van Ouderdijk is in third with the 57.44. In the men's 100 IM, it was the showdown of the Texas Longhorns training partners Shane Casas and Hubert Coast, as Casas won his Triple Crown with a time of 50.28, his fastest of the series so far, and Coast was back in a 50.56 for his second swim of the night, and then in third was Noe Ponti in a 51.02, just barely beating out Finlay Knox, who was in a 51.05. One thing you might notice, either looking at the results or watching the race video of this, is just how ridiculously fast Caleb Dressel's world record is in this event, specifically over the back half of this race, because at the 50-meter turn halfway through, Casas was just under that world record pace. He flipped in a 22.46 ahead of Dressel in a 22.49. Then Dressel manages to put exactly a second on him over the back half, 49.28 to 50.28. Dressel had a ridiculous short course breaststroke split in this event and then was able to bring it home really well. It just, with how fast Casas was over the first half of this race with butterfly and then backstroke, two of his best strokes, it just really highlights how insane that closing speed was. For the second stop in a row, it was Ellen Walsh getting the win in the women's 400 IM, clocking a time of 4:22.97 ahead of Mary Sophie Harvey with a 4:24.25, and then Mia Narita in a 4:26.43. In the men's distance race for this meet, the 1500, Sam Short returns to the top of the podium after losing the 800 in Westmont. He clocked a time of 14:35.33 for a healthy win over Carson Foster in second, who's continuing to race that distance freestyle just kind of for the fun of it. He was a 14:44.53, and Brendan Smith was in third with a 14:45.84. So him and Smith had a bit of a battle at the end there, with Smith just hanging on to that second place position. Did I say Smith hanging on to that second place position? I meant Foster. In the men's 50 backstroke, we see Hubert Koch win his Triple Crown in this backstroke distance, clocking a time of 22.67 ahead of Thomas Chacon in a 22.93. Chacon was actually first at the half by a couple of hundredths, and then Koch, being Koch with his fast back half, was able to accelerate by him in order to get his hand on the wall first by a little bit here, and Kasper Sikowski was tied for third at the half and stayed in third with a 23.00. Now, the fact that Koch has been winning these 50 backstrokes now at 3 stops in a row is super impressive, given that he is way more of a tuner backstroker known for his insanely fast back half splits. In fact, he just barely won this event over Sikowski by 1/100th in Westmont, but he's also had some pretty decent margins of victory at both Carmel and now in Toronto, which is, again, I can't say it enough, crazy impressive for him. In the women's 200 freestyle, it was another world record out of Molly O'Callaghan. 1 week before in Westmont, she became the first woman in history to break 150, clocking a time of 1:49.77, exactly 1 second faster than she was in Carmel. Now she's gone even faster, winning her triple crown in this distance with a 1:49.36, re-breaking that world record and now challenging the 1:49 barrier. In fact, she actually said in her post-race interview that she was kind of thinking about how cool it would be to go 1:48. First woman in history to ever break 150. She's already got the next barrier on her brain. Bonnie Pallister continues to show her range in the freestyle event. She already won the 400. She's won the 1500 in Westmont, and she's about to win the 800. We'll get to that. And she's in second in the 200 with a 151.75, with about a second over Erica Fairweather, who is in third with a 152.71. One interesting thing about O'Callaghan and her new world record is just the fact that she didn't have a massive change in her strategy, going out way faster, closing way faster, anything like that. She just seemed to get kind of progressively faster over her old split, just all around generally a little bit quicker on each leg, which is probably one of the better ways to improve your world records. The men's 200 IM, Shane Costas wins his triple crown in this distance, returning under the 150 barrier after being a few hundredths above in Westmont with a time of 1:49.79. Not quite as quick as his swim was in Carmel, but that one he had Leon Marchand to push him to a ridiculously fast time as he got that win. This time, Tomoyuki Matsushita actually did give him a bit of a push at the end. He clocked a time of 1:51.43, and Finlay Knox was pushing Matsushita with a 1:51.50. In the women's 100 backstroke, Kaylee McEwen got the win over Regan Smith, winning that $2,500 crown buster bonus as Smith was going for her triple crown in this distance. Smith was a bit off of the time that she clocked 1 week before in Westmont, where she tied her own world record with a 55.02. Here she was a 55.57, with McEwen barely getting the win over her in a 54.49. Catherine Burkhoff was in third, pushing that 55-second barrier, but not quite dipping under it, clocking a time of 55.10. That is another personal best out of Kaylee McEwen as she resets her own oceanic record with that winning time. The champion of the men's 100 breast, Casper Corbeau, is back in the water again for the men's 50 breast, getting his second win of the stop, clocking a time of 25.77, just 1/10 ahead of Adam Peaty, who was a 25.87 for his second place finish of this stop. Peaty is another swimmer that we've seen kind of gradually improve as the stops went on, which makes a ton of sense for where we assume he's at right now. This series is his first series of meets after the Paris Olympics, and presumably there was a bit of gap in training there, so as he's getting back into shape and more importantly getting back into racing, it makes sense that we're going to see him gradually improve, not only in time, but also climbing up the rankings. And it's cool to see him making some podiums at this final stop here. In our third place position is our only other man under 26 seconds, Finn Brooks, with a 25.94 to just slip under that barrier. Gretchen Walsh continues to blow away the field in the women's 50 butterfly and also continues to set the standards too high for herself so that way she can't break the world record, because she clocked a time of 23.91. Far faster than anyone else has ever been in history. The second fastest performer is a 24.38. But in Carmel, she set the world record of 23.72, and her old world record before this World Cup series was a 23.92. In Westmont, she was a 23.90, now she's a 23.91. If she went these swims in reverse order, 23.91, 23.90, then 23.72, she would have broke the world record 3 times, but in the order she did it, she only got to check once. But it's probably hard to be too upset about that when she did get $10,000 for winning her triple crown in this discipline, as she comes in a decent ways ahead of Alexandria Perkins, who also sets an oceanic record with a 24.63. Like I said, the second fastest performer ever is a 24.38, so 24.63, that shows you about how quick that actually is. And then also the gap that she has over Phoebe Bacon in third, who's a 25.38. For his second event of this stop, Josh Liendo got another $2,500 crown buster bonus in the men's 100 freestyle, this time busting the Triple Crown attempt of Jack Alexi. Leandro got his hand on the wall first in a time of 45:30, very quick, ahead of Alexi 45:55, and Chris Giuliano was also under 46 seconds in a 45:71, as was Matt Richards in fourth with a 45:92. Leandro, Alexi, and Giuliano were the front runners for the entire race here, as Leandro had the lead at the 25 and 50 meter turns. Then at the 75 meter turn, Giuliano actually took the lead by a little bit, relegating Leandro to second place. Then Leandro surged past him. Meanwhile, Alexi was in third, and then also went by Giuliano to grab second. Kate Douglas wins another Triple Crown, this time coming in the women's 100 breaststroke with a time of 102.93. She's 3/100ths off of the time that she went to win the event in Carmel of 102.90, but a bit quicker than she was in Westmont, so that's a decent sign for her next event, the 100 freestyle. Stay tuned for that one. Then in second, Mona McSherry in a 103.84, and then Rebecca Meter in third in a 104.48. Ilya Karun wins his Triple Crown in the men's 200 butterfly, clocking a time of 149.71, way ahead of Alberto Rossetti in second with a 151.63, then Mitchell Schott in 152.10. In the men's 400 IM, Shane Casas wins his event for the second straight stop, this time in a very fast time of 3:56.13. That is a new World Cup record, breaking the record held by Diaceto in a 3:57.25, so he breaks it by a little over a second. And that's very notable because basically 1 year after that record, Seto set the world record in this event of 3:54.81, so that's a pretty impressive record to break. And in the women's distance race of this stop, we saw Lonnie Pallister break Katie Ledecky's world record in the 800 freestyle, and she smashed it. Ledecky held the world record in a time of 7:57.42. This was set back in 2022, the last time the World Cup Series was in North America. Pallister clocked a time of 7:54.00. Absolutely smashed. Pallister stepped on the gas early and did not let up. She outsplit Ledecky on 7 of the 8 100-meter splits. Watching the race, I was waiting for that moment where the world record line would start to make that ground back up on Pallister and it would be a race at the end, and that moment just never came. Erica Fairweather and Caitlin Deans once again round out the distance freestyle podium here with an 8:09.69 for Fairweather and an 8:11.76 for Deans. Gretchen Walsh breaks her own World Cup record in the women's 100 butterfly by a pretty decent amount as she claims her Triple Crown in this event. She clocked a time of 53.10 ahead of her old World Cup record from the Carmel stop of 53.69, but of course a bit behind her world record of 52.71, just because she absolutely smashed that record during the Short Course World Championships. She's made it too hard for even herself to break now. Gretchen Walsh is the only woman to ever break 54 seconds, and she's also broken 53 seconds and almost did it again here. She also won this event by a little over 2 seconds ahead of Alexandria Perkins, who's been going incredibly quick times in the butterfly races, but just happens to be running into the wood chipper that is Gretchen Walsh. She clocked a time of 55.11, being over a second ahead of the third place finisher, Ruth van Aardendik, in a 56.16. For the third stop in a row, Ilya Karun managed to get the win over world record holder in the men's 50 butterfly, Noé Ponty, and this time it was by 1/100th of a second, 21.80 to 21.81, as Ilya got that Triple Crown bonus by the narrowest margin possible. Meanwhile, Josh Leandro is right behind those two powerhouses with a 21.91. Also being way ahead of the rest of the field along with those front runners is Singapore swimmer Tianwei Chung in a 21.93. And what's funny is Leandro swimming that time of 21.91 actually would have bumped Tiong out of the top 10 performers list of all time because he sat in number 10. But now that he swam that time, which is a little bit quicker than his old best time and a new Asian record, he actually jumps up a little bit more in the all-time rankings and now sits in 9th with Leandro in 8th. And for the second stop in a row in the women's 200 backstroke, Kaylee McEwen set a new world record record. Meanwhile, Gretchen Walsh was also under the old world record. Last time, these two became the first two swimmers to ever break 158, and now they both went under that old standard set by McEwen. Though this time, McEwen had a much larger margin of victory. Last time it was like 4/100ths, this time 157.33 to 157.86. The time that McEwen was in Westmont was a 157.87, so Smith was under that by 1/100th. Again, both incredibly quick swims there, but insanely quick right there out of McEwen. And of course, it's no surprise that that is a triple crown and $10,000 bonus for McEwen in this 200 backstroke. She busted Regan Smith's crown in the 100 backstroke. Regan Smith tried her best to get her back, but couldn't quite do it, just because when you're up against a 157.33, that's a tall ask. Then rounding out the podium in third, a decent bit ahead of fourth, is Phoebe Bacon in a 200.80. Hubert Koch wins the triple crown in the men's 100 backstroke, and for the second time of this stop, does so in world record fashion. He clocked a time of 48.16 as he led the race the entire way, which breaks the old world record of 48.33 held by Coleman Stewart from 2021. Kasper Sikowski gets the second place finish with a 49.41, and the only other swimmer under 50 seconds was Estonia's Ralf Trabunstov in a 49.92. Once again, in the women's 50 breaststroke, we see a trio of swimmers going under 30 seconds in order to make up those podium positions. Florine Gaspard in a 29.48 for the win, 1/10 behind is Mona McSherry in a 29.58, then Satomi Suzuki in a 29.90 for that bronze medal spot. In the men's 200 breaststroke, we saw Kasper Gobo claim his triple crown in world record fashion while shattering a massive time barrier, because he just became the first man to ever break 2 minutes in this event, and he didn't just do it by a little, he did it by almost half a second as he clocked a time of 159.52. And in second place is our 16-year-old phenom from Japan, Shin Ohashi, as he actually breaks the world junior record with a time of 2:02.03, as he has a decent bit of margin over Yamamoto Fukasawa, also from Japan, who is in third with a 2:03.82. That is an incredibly fast swim out of Shin Ohashi, who just continues to be on an absolute tear in these breaststroke events. Right after seeing the first ever sub 2-minute swim in the men's 200 breaststroke, we saw another ridiculous time barrier fall, this time in the women's 100 freestyle, as Kate Douglas became the first woman in history to break 50 seconds in the 100 freestyle, clocking a time of 49.93. It was already a decently big surprise when she broke this world record in Westmont with a time of 50.19. Now she's not only improved on that record by a decent amount, she's also blown by that insane time barrier. Ollie O'Callaghan was also very quick in second place with a 50.82, and Mari Steenbergen rounds out the top three with a 51.10. In the men's 200 freestyle, Luke Hobson wins his triple crown, which honestly surprised me how fast he was at the first stop, just because he's not known for being crazy fast in season, but he's been getting the job done here, and even more so here, with the 139.94 ahead of Chris Giuliano, who is in second with the 140.39. These two were trading the lead a bit until the 150 turn, where Hobson took it for good, and then Giuliano was not able to catch him. These two were kind of in a league of their own, with Maximilian Giuliani. Also, when Giuliano and Giuliani are right next to each other, always makes me want to say the wrong name. He was in third with a 141.40. Women's 200 IM, Alex Walsh wins her triple crown with a 2:04.01. That's the best time for her, ahead of Ellen Walsh in a 2:04.75, and Abby Wood rounded out the top three with a 2:05.33. That was our final event of this stop, so let's take a look at how our top 5 finishers for both men and women placed in the overall series. Reminder that they are scored on a combination of where they place and how fast the swim was. For the second year in a row, we see Kate Douglas take the overall series win in a narrow battle with an American teammate. Last year, it was her and Regan Smith constantly battling for the win. This time, it was her and Gretchen Walsh. Walsh was leading after stop number 1, but then Douglas started putting in some work, breaking that 100 freestyle world record, which is honestly the event I thought was going to hold her back, because I didn't think it was going to be quite as good on the aqua point side of things as her 100 and 200 breaststrokes. then she started breaking the world records, and it was the thing that helped her get the win. In third place, Kaylee McEwen managed to, I think, jump up a few spots here to get third. Lonnie Pallister is in fourth, and Reagan Smith, I think, falls a little bit to fifth with that 169.8. A big part of that is the fact that McEwen got that win in the 100 backstroke over Smith. These two have been kind of taking bites out of each other's point totals because part of it is their placement, and when you knock someone from first down to second, that can deal a blow of a few points, and I think that one was just enough to give McEwen a bit of a boost and Smith a bit more of a hindrance at this stop in particular. On the men's side of things, it was expected after stop number 1 that Hubert Koch would take the win, and things played out exactly as expected. He was the only one who had a path to winning 9 events, and that's exactly what he did. Then we see Casas get a narrow second place over Corbeau by 0.2 of a point, and then a couple points behind them, Ilya Karun, and then a decent chunk before we go down to Carson Foster in 5th, but that is crazy impressive out of Foster, considering the fact that the only primary event that he was swimming of his was the 400 IM. Other than that, he was swimming distance freestyle. And that was every race result from the final stop of the 2025 Swimming World Cup. And once again, this World Cup series was incredibly fun to watch and incredibly fun to make content about. And now that everything is all wrapped up, I want to know, what was your favorite race from the entire series? It can be this stop, it can be Carmel, it can be Westmont. What was your number 1 race overall? Let me know down below.